You literally can't get your music onto Spotify without going through a distributor who, by definition, has to pay you your master royalties. That's their two jobs. It's to distribute your recordings to streaming platforms and to pay you your master royalties. However, their job isn't to pay you your publishing royalties. And unlike on the master side, you don't get paid those publishing royalties by default. Like, you can build a thriving streaming audience, think that you're doing everything right. I've got 100,000 monthly listeners. I've got 1 million monthly listeners. I'm crushing it. And I'm getting a great DistroKid or 2-loss payment, but not even know that you're not touching your publishing income.
What's going on? Welcome to The New Music Business. I'm your host, Ari Herstand, author of How to Make It in the New Music Business, the book, 3rd edition, out now everywhere, all formats, audiobook, ebook, hardcover, however you like books, you can find the book. Today, my guest is Jacob Paul. He is the VP of Platform Growth and Brand Strategy at Kobalt and KOSIGN. Now, KOSIGN you might not have heard of. This is a very new service that Kobalt has launched. It launched in February of this year, of 2025, and it is an admin publishing service. So we spend a lot of time today discussing what publishing is, how it works, how songwriters are paid, the difference between artists and songwriters, why it's helpful to have a publisher or an admin publisher and not just work with a PRO or work with an MRO or something like that. I pressed him quite a bit on, well, can't we just sign up with this org and this org? And what money am I leaving on the table? Or how do I get all my money? And so we really break it down. Now, I have been impressed with Kobalt for years. I talk about it in the book. I appreciate that they're an independent organization. They're not tied to a major publisher. They're not tied to any of the majors out there. They're a completely independent publisher. And they've become the 4th largest publishing company in the world behind Warner, Universal, and Sony, because they have attracted such very high-profile talent like Max Martin or Phoebe Bridgers or Dr. Luke. And they've attracted this talent because they have really innovated and completely changed and upended the model of publishing. And we go into that. He discusses the difference between co-pub deals and what are full publishing deals and what are admin deals. And so anything you want to know about publishing, for the most part, a lot of it is going to get answered in this episode. And so I really appreciated hearing from Jacob, and he was super helpful in breaking everything down. Full disclosure, KOSIGN is an official partner of Ari's Take, but I do want to make clear that we scheduled this interview before we were partnered because this is a big hole in the industry. And as longtime listeners and readers know of Ari's Take, I only partner with organizations that I can stand behind and that I trust and appreciate. And so the reason that I decided to partner with KOSIGN is because I looked into them. We had a conversation in advance. I poked holes through. I saw what they were doing. I researched. I even applied. I went through the full application process. I'm like, okay, these guys are legit. And so we are now official partners with them. So you will hear some KOSIGN ads throughout various podcast episodes. You will see some of their banners. You will maybe get some emails about KOSIGN. I stand behind them, honestly, and I tell every company that I work with, I'm relying on the users, on my readers, on my listeners to give me feedback. So if you've worked with KOSIGN or Kobalt and you have feedback, of course, please let me know. They're partners throughout the years that we've had for a decade and that we're still partnered with. And then there's some partners that I had to drop because I heard from enough listeners, enough users, readers, that their service was not as strong as it once was, or I heard some things that I didn't know just by looking into them. So I scrutinize everyone in the industry, whether we're partnered with them or not. Honestly, I scrutinize our partners sometimes even a bit more because I want to make sure that they get our stamp of approval and that I can fully stand behind them. And because I know I act essentially as de facto customer support representative for every company that we partner with or that I review. So I encourage everyone to go check out KOSIGN. That's KOSIGN music.com and look into them. And if you are in need of an admin publishing company, and Jacob talks about kind of the threshold of songwriters that they accept, you can go check them out and look into them. You can find KOSIGN on the socials. You can find, of course, kosignmusic.com with the K. Find all of us that make the show happen at Ari's Take on the socials. Find me at Ari Herstand on Instagram. But if you wouldn't mind, just pause this episode right now. Give us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Thumbs up on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the follow button if you want us to keep populating your feed. And then also visit aristake.com and get on the email list. That's the best way to stay in touch with us, is getting on that email list. All right, let's kick into the show. Jacob Paul, welcome to the show.
Ari, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So we're here to discuss one of the most confounding, confusing aspects of the music industry, something that is at the core of our industry and that makes everything work and run, but is understood by so very few,
That is
unfortunately. And but it is so important.
Right.
So that is, of course, publishing. Before we really get into KOSIGN and Kobalt and admin publishing and all of the stuff that we will get into, please help everyone understand, what is publishing? Why should we care about it? Where does it come from? Just give us like a little brief publishing overview so we have a solid foundation to build off of for everyone listening right now.
Okay, sounds good. We'll start really high level, and then we can go peel the layers of the onion over time.
Amazing.
At its most basic, I would say publishing is the business of ensuring that people who write songs get paid whenever their songs are played, right? Whether that is on Spotify or Apple Music or YouTube or a Meta platform or TikTok, or played on the radio or played in film and TV, or if you buy vinyl and because you want to play the record, or it's played in a bar. There are all of these venues that we listen to music in a way where some amount of money is being transacted. Someone's paying to listen to it in some way, shape, or form. And the issue is that we have lots of songwriters who might write on a single song. They might not be the artist, they might not be the label, but they still need to get paid for their contribution to the composition, the work, the song, right? And that's the business of publishing. And it gets into lots of complications. It has a really interesting history that we can get into. But at a high level, that's what publishing is, and that's why publishing is important.
That's a great overview, high level. Let me ask a few questions about it, because that seems pretty straightforward. But before we move forward, you used the word artist, and you also used the word songwriter.
Right.
I think a lot of us interchange those two terms. Tell me why you mean different things when you say artist versus songwriter, and what that means to you, and how we should use those terms, or how we should think about it, at least for today's conversation.
Right. So the reason I used it is because there are two copyrights to any track that you listen to, that you buy, that you stream. There are two copyrights that have two different revenue streams to them. And I think this is going to be familiar with a lot of people listening. There is the master recording, the sound recording. That's like the actual recording. And then there's the song, which is the music, the lyrics, the composition. If you're an artist, you're definitely attached to the recording in that you're generally the one who played on the recording, or you're singing on the recording. You may or may not have also written the song. I think most artists today are songwriters. They write their own projects. Some of them are 100% songwriters. They literally do everything themselves. But a lot of artists might work with a collaborator who is just a writing partner, who isn't the artist. They might not have any ownership over the sound recording copyright or the master copyright, but they're still contributing lyrical ideas, musical actual pieces of music to the work that's being listened to, right? So when I say artist and songwriter, they can be used interchangeably, but they're not always used interchangeably. And really what I mean is publishing is the business of giving credit and royalties to anyone who owns shares of a song. That could be a pure songwriter, that could be a producer who is helping actually create a beat or create, sonic material, but there's compositional elements to that.
Yeah.
And or it could be the artist who is the person on the face of the album cover.
Great. That's a really important and great distinction. It is something that I've gotten into. It is I think this is the most misunderstood aspect of the entire industry, is because so many artists are also songwriters and we're like, I do everything. What's the difference between, like, I distributed my record, through DistroKid or, Too Lost or Symphonic or whatever. Aren't they paying me all the money?
I think I think what you're touching on is a huge part of why publishing is so misunderstood, which is that, and let's talk about it. Let's start from the artist perspective, right?
Okay.
Speaking to people who are independent artists and also write their songs, you get paid. We talked about how there's two types of royalties: master royalties for your recording, publishing royalties for your song.
Yep.
If you want to collect everything, if you want to be making the most money you can off of your royalties, you need to be collecting both. But here's the issue is that you collect your master royalties by default. And what I mean by that is that you literally can't get your music onto Spotify without going through a distributor who, by definition, has to pay you your master royalties. That's their two jobs. It's to distribute your recordings to streaming platforms and to pay you your master royalties. However, their job isn't to pay you your publishing royalties. And unlike on the master side, you don't get paid those publishing royalties by default. Like, you can build a thriving streaming audience, think that you're doing everything right. I've got 100,000 monthly listeners. I've got 1 million monthly listeners. I'm crushing it. And I'm getting a great DistroKid or 2 loss payment, but not even know that you're not touching your publishing income. So in that way, it can be invisible to a lot of artists. And it's certainly invisible to a lot of songwriters who aren't artists who don't even really have control over the recording itself. And they, so you really need to raise your hand and say, I want to collect my publishing income. And then when you make that decision, the second problem is it's really complicated. It's a very fragmented landscape. We'll get into this. There's dozens, if 100 collection societies around the world. There are different types of publishing royalties. So it's very daunting for people because they're not getting it by default. It feels sort of invisible. And when you start to peel back the onion a bit and say, okay, I want to collect my publishing income, you uncover a very, very fragmented landscape for how to do it. We'll talk about, what Kobalt does, what publishers do, what KOSIGN does. This is a new platform that we've launched at Kobalt. But at the end of the day, the job is to get money to people who own parts of songs and make their lives easier in collecting that money.
Great. I love that. And that's a great segue because you broke it down. And I love how you framed it. You get your master royalties by default. Like you said, you can't put your music on streaming services without that pathway. It's like you send your music there and they're going to send some money back to that distributor who sent the music there, but that's only for the master royalty. So for the publishing, for those who wrote the songs, like you said, there's a whole web of ways that they need to get paid. So let's talk about that. So now we understand kind of who, what publishing is for. It's not for the artist, as we're going to use the term artist and differentiate that for songwriter. Publishing is not for artists. It's also not for people that did not help write the song. So even to break that down more specifically, if a producer is hired to create a production with an artist and they did not help write the song and they're not cut into the publishing, they're saying, we're hiring you to help us record this in your studio. We're going to pay you some money to do that. You might even make some master royalties on the back end, but they didn't help write the song. They don't get publishing, so we're not even talking about the producers. If that was the agreement from the get-go, they're not a songwriter. They're not getting publishing. Some producers do, but some don't. Right. And similarly, like if I were to record a cover song, so a song that I didn't write, and I'm going to go put this out. So a song, let's say, Jacob, you wrote the song.
Right.
I'm going to record it and I'm going to release it. I'm not going to collect any publishing royalties on that song, on that recording, because I didn't write the song. Even though I might have made an incredible recording, I might have recorded some really dope guitars on it that have all these cool new hooks and whatever. I'm not going to get any publishing royalties because I didn't write that song, even though I'm the artist, right?
Right. And by the way, your cover recording of my song that I wrote might become a smash hit, and it might eclipse my original rendition of that song. Yes. And that's a really powerful lesson about the power of publishing. Yes. Because when you make a song in the world, it's not fixed to a specific medium, right? It's attached to a specific recording to start, but other artists can go and take that song and cover it, and they might bring it to sort of a level of success that you never could have dreamed of. And that's actually really common. And that's why publishing is so important, because if I'm properly claiming on my song, my ownership of the song, and I'm getting paid on not just my recording of it, but every other recording of it, that could become a evergreen source of income for me for the rest of my life. I'm just thinking of so many, like the Torn by Natalie Imbruglia. I hope I'm saying her name right. But that, she didn't write that song, And she wasn't the original version of that song. It was a band called Edna Swap, right?
Oh,
Which is
I
just
didn't know that. Oh,
right,
damn.
yeah. By the way, the Edna Swap rendition's awesome. It's like this
Okay, I gotta
grungy
check
sort
that
of
out.
just guitar and vocal version.
Cool. That's news to me.
But it sort of shows the power of publishing. And in fact, the original writers of Torn, who were in the band Edna Swap, this is a total aside, we're now going off topic, which I'll try not to do, founded Pulse Music, Scott Culler.
Oh, that's cool.
Who
That's really
understand the power of publishing, and their life story is an example of that, which is like you write a song, you put it out, you never know what's going to happen. Someone could take it and bring it to a new level, and all of a sudden you've made a fortune on publishing. So that's why it's so important.
Absolutely. And I always think of the example of like Whitney Houston's song "I Will Always Love You" that was actually written by Dolly Parton.
Dolly Parton, exactly.
Even though Dolly is an artist that we all know and love, she wrote "I Will Always Love You." Her version, while great, didn't reach the level of success or just like kind of that Whitney Houston's version did, which was everywhere and was a smash hit. But Whitney Houston's not getting paid publishing for that recording. She's getting the master royalties, or her label is. And then Dolly is getting paid for the publishing on the Whitney Houston version of "I Will Always Love You" because she wrote it. So yeah, beautiful. All right, let's jump in. So we now understand in publishing. So talk to me about like, I've known about Kobalt for years. And Kobalt is a standalone kind of independent publishing company. Representing songwriters, all that stuff. But tell me about, maybe just like the history of Kobalt, what Kobalt is,
Absolutely.
and maybe what, I think we understand publishing companies, but break down Kobalt and then how it got to KOSIGN, really what we're here to talk about today.
So Kobalt is the largest independent publishing company in the world, which means that aside from the three major publishers, which are very familiar names, Warner Chappell, Sony, Universal Music Publishing. These are companies that are almost like 100 years old. Kobalt is the biggest publisher that's not those three, and it's by far much, much younger than those three. It has a very different story and trajectory than those three companies. So Kobalt really, it's a 25-year-old company. It was born at the very beginning of the 2000s, and it was really launched as a tech disruptor within publishing. And the reason why it was important at the time, and still is, frankly, is that to actually collect publishing money from a very, very complicated landscape where you have PROs in every country, and you have sometimes different types of collection societies across performing royalties, which is one type of publishing royalty, versus mechanical royalties, which is another. And it creates a giant administrative and data problem. Like, not to get too technical and too boring, but the process of making sure you're registering songs everywhere around the world, and doing so in an efficient way. And then equally as importantly, getting all of the data back from those sources of payment and making sure that it's in a structured platform, and that if you're the songwriter, you can actually like see what's going on. Like, hey, where's my royalties coming in? Like, what's my registration picture looking like? It, at the beginning of the 21st century, like that was looking very rough. And to be fair, it was getting harder and harder because the number of transactions were exploding because of the internet, because of the growth of download and streamings. And now there are more and more platforms coming online every day that use songs in a commercialized way. And it was just overwhelming the traditional legacy industry of collecting songwriting royalties. So there was a real need to say, like, let's digitize this. Like, let's just build a single digital platform that's built specifically to handle the process of sending out registrations around the world, entering into licenses with thousands of digital platforms, and aggregating all of that into one place, which is for a songwriter, like, here's your publishing income, here's total transparency, you can log onto a portal, you can see it. So again, I'm just giving some kind of a little bit nerdy history, but that is how Kobalt came onto the scene. And it went from a startup to being the fourth biggest music publisher, in large part by solving that problem really effectively. And, fast forward to now, we're a global music company, right? We're not just an administration company. We're not just a tech company. We have 10 offices around the world. We have like an A&R team and a sync team and all of that good stuff. But I think that at our DNA, we're very interested in trying to make the publishing landscape less fragmented and just sort of like deliver an easy and streamlined and efficient and transparent like way of just like getting songwriters paid, right? It's your money. If you're a songwriter, publishing is literally your money. you want to get it. You want to understand where it's coming from. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
sort of the
and
background of how we were able to build this kind of business from the start.
right, and that's great, and that's a great background. One of the reasons you became the fourth biggest publishing company in the world. I mean, you attracted some of these superstar songwriters.
Right.
Speak to that a little bit.
So yes. So many of our, honestly, day one, if not day one, but our oldest sort of relationships that we're most proud of is that we represent people like a Max Martin, Dr. Luke, Paul McCartney, Stevie Nicks, Childish
Max Martin,
Gambino.
who has more number one
Right.
singles, hit songs than anyone else in the world. I think he surpassed Lennon and McCartney at
He
some
has,
point, right?
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
And it's a multi-generational roster. It's a really exciting roster. People like Phoebe Bridgers and Bon Iver, all the way to Carol G. And we are a global company. Part of that is built off the strength of any publisher, which is having a great sync team, having a great A&R team who's making the most opportunities for our roster. Part of it is also coming from, I think, our philosophy around how publishing deals should work. So I should say, like, traditionally, like, for example, the major publishers, they built their business off of acquisition, acquiring copyrights. Like the traditional publishing deal that you do, which is still a deal people do to this day. It's called either a full publishing deal or a co-publishing deal. And essentially what you're doing is you're selling half of your ownership of your song copyrights to your publisher in exchange for maybe an advance, and them collecting your publishing money. And when Kobalt came out the gate, immediately it said, look, we're actually not going to try to compete with that. And we're not going to even really do that. We're going to create a concept called the admin deal, or we're going to popularize this concept, which is to say, like, us collecting your publishing money, us registering songs around the world, it's a service arrangement. You own your copyrights. You should retain that ownership. And what we'll do is we'll make the process of collecting your money much easier and more transparent, but we're not going to take ownership of your copyrights. And I think that was, like, in addition to the technological disruption of trying to build a really unified platform, I think there was sort of the commercial disruption of Kobalt, which was really popularizing the concept of admin and of publishing as just a service.
I want to talk about that, but I do want to go back for a second. You mentioned full publishing deal or co-publishing deal, and I think there's I'd love to know what that means. Like, what is a traditional publishing deal like from the majors, a Sony, a Warner, a Universal? What does full publishing deal mean? What does co-publishing deal mean?
Right. So, I think in a lot of ways, a lot of the industry is caught up where it's not like you can only get an admin deal from Kobalt anymore, but traditional deals are still very popular. What it means is this. Traditionally, when you have a copyright or you have your catalog, it's split into two halves, one called the writer's share, one called the publisher's share. For performance royalties, for PROs, that's really baked into how PROs even pay people. Like, they pay people the writer's share just directly, right?
Yeah.
But in a traditional publishing deal, what you're saying is, hey, publisher, hopefully you're gonna pay me in advance, you're gonna collect my royalties, and the ownership of the publisher share that I own now as a songwriter, by default, I own everything. But now that I'm entering into a publishing deal with you, it's a full publishing deal, you are now gonna own that forever. And the reason I'm giving this to you is because you are paying me in advance, you're helping me out in my career, you're gonna be really active creatively and, trying to grow my profile, and I'm gonna assign you ownership of this publisher share of the copyright. In a co-publishing deal, it's all of that, but instead of assigning the full publisher share to the publisher, you're assigning half of the publisher share to the publisher. So what that ends up being is 25% of the overall copyright that you own.
Okay, so a full pub deal, essentially, if I'm understanding this correctly, about 50% of the money is going to be kept by the publishing company, and 50% of the money is going to be given to the songwriter. Is that right? And then on a co-pub deal,
that's essentially right. Sometimes the actual rates of the royalties are different from the copyright ownership that you're assigning. Those two things don't necessarily need to always be the same. But the way I think about traditional deals is that you're assigning life of copyright, is what it's called, which means forever, or for as long as the copyright is not in the public domain. You're assigning that ownership to the publisher, which means that, at the end of your deal, sometimes in a co-publishing deal, it will actually come to an end and the writer will be able to sign part of their catalog elsewhere, but the co-publisher will still own that half of the publisher's share, that 25% of everything. And it's literally an asset that now they have. They can collect money on it. They can sell it to someone else. So you're transferring ownership to another party in a traditional deal.
Okay, so in these traditional publishing deals, whether it's a full pub deal or a co-pub deal, it historically has always dealt in ownership. So
Correct.
It's just that in a full pub deal, they own the publishing and they own and they're going to keep 50% or so. Now, can that percentage change? Can they say, we're doing a publishing deal, but we're only going to give you 25% or 40%? Is that negotiable? Like a record deal is negotiable?
I think that you can make a contract that says anything. I think that generally when you're looking at transferring ownership in publishing deals, they follow those frameworks. And honestly, from my vantage point, the most common one is the co-publishing deal, which is basically selling 25% of your catalog to your publisher up front.
And I do want to just clarify for people listening, because this you mentioned publisher share and songwriter share, which is a little confusing because in the indie self-published community, what I've seen a lot, and it's just because people don't quite grasp this concept. Songwriters are trying to split that up with their co-writers and be like, well, I'm the artist, so I'm going to keep the publisher share of your songwriting, and so you'll get the 50% of the songwriter share, and I'm going to get all the publisher share, and I'm going to be then also the 50% of the. You don't actually break that up when you don't have a publisher involved. It's not like I try to communicate to songwriters. If you write a song with someone else, it is and you're agreeing that it's going to be a 50-50 split. You each have your own publisher. You don't split up the publishing amongst other songwriters. It's I'm one writer. I have my own publishing. I don't take your publishing. You don't take my publishing.
Yes.
Publishing, it's attached to my songwriter. So it's like I cannot make this point hard enough. And if people listening right now take away one thing, it's do not split up the publishing share of this song amongst your co-writers, because that's not how it works. And so I know you mentioned that just based on working with a publisher, and there's like the performance royalties, but like got to be super clear about that, because I've seen this with a lot of the indie songwriters I work with, and they show me their split sheets, and they're like, oh yeah, we wrote this, but because I'm the artist and I'm handling more of this, and I was going to register it, like I'm going to keep the publisher's share, and they're going to keep the songwriter, and then like it gets so confusing, and I'm like, that's not how it works.
Definitely
No, don't do that.
If you're in the studio, if you're writing songs with your friends or bandmates, just align on the splits of the song.
Right.
That's your job. The minute you start telling someone I'm taking your publisher share, you've just become a publisher, and you need to sign them. And if you haven't actually done that contract, you are just going down a road you don't want to go down. So
Great. Well put. Okay, so now let's talk admin deals and what that means. So Kobalt came on the scene, and they're saying, we're not doing the traditional deals where we're going to own your stuff. We're not doing co-pub. We're not doing full pub. We're not owning any of this. We're going to essentially help you collect the money owed to you as songwriters. And we're going to call Kobalt's a publisher, so they represent songwriters, and they're going to go get the money and then get them paid. Now, what is that deal? If it's not ownership, how does it work? How do you make money?
The way it works is like a service arrangement. And as the administrator, like Kobalt in this case, and we'll talk about KOSIGN too, which is sort of the successor in some ways to Kobalt, it means that you are doing the work of publishing admin, which is I'm sending your registration around the world. I'm making sure there's no platform you're not collecting money from. I'm making sure there's no collection society. There's no territory you're not collecting money from. Mm-hmm. I'm collecting that money. Mm-hmm. I'm paying you that money, but I'm taking an admin percentage off the top to pay myself in exchange for doing all of this work for you and making sure that your catalog's being taken care of and that you're getting your money quickly and your registrations quickly. So that's the essence of how an admin deal works. And you do it for a period of time. So that could be 3 years, that could be 5 years, that could be whatever you want. But what you're not doing, crucially, as an administrator, as a publishing administrator, is that you're not taking that underlying copyright ownership. So what it means is that once you're at the end of your admin deal, you can take your publishing catalog and you can sign to a different publisher, or you can sell it, or you can re-up with your current publishing administrator, but you own those copyrights. And from a Kobalt perspective, in a way, it puts us in the hot seat all the time. And that's kind of where we want to be. Like all of our most successful client relationships, a Bon Iver, a Max Martin or Dr. Luke, like these are folks who we have to reprove ourselves like every 3 years, right?
Yeah.
Because they could walk.
Right.
We didn't sign them up front to a long-term deal or to a deal where we are going to own a chunk of their copyrights. We said, look, we're going to perform a service for you. And if we don't do a good job, then you can leave and we will be, out of a job. And, the bet was if we do this really, really, really well, people will understand the value of keeping their ownership and the value of being in this admin relationship. And obviously we'll add in creative services as well for Kobalt, and A&R and Sync, and we'll be able to build a business this way. And that was the bet that we've made. And that's still what really fuels our business.
Yeah, and to clarify, every publishing company out there has an admin department, or at least all the major ones out there do, or they are handling admin in some way. So like Warner, Sony, Universal, like even though they're doing ownership, and I think a lot of people think about like the creative services, like you mentioned, they set people up on co-writes, they work sync licensing, try to get their songs on TV and whatnot. But everyone needs to handle admin, so they need to go register the songs, they need to collect the money. And it's interesting that you guys have kind of flipped that, where it's like you call yourself an admin company, but you are also handling creative services in terms of, I know Kobalt songwriters that you send out on co-writes. You put people in rooms to make songs.
I think for Kobalt, we really call ourselves a global music publishing company that has its DNA in ownership for artists. So I wouldn't even necessarily say, Kobalt is only an admin company. I don't think that's true. Yep. I think that we're a 21st century music company. And I think that success in the era that we're in and the success in the future, in many ways for artists and for, I should say for songwriters,
right.
Some of whom might also be artists.
Correct.
But, I think that ownership in the long run is extremely important.
Yes.
For most songwriters.
Absolutely.
And I think that what we're trying to do is not pigeonhole ourselves as just admin, but to create a service in the publishing space that honestly is like positioned to make creators be successful in this time, in this century, not like the previous century.
Totally. Cool. So let's talk about KOSIGN, because for years, Kobalt, and I've been an admirer of Kobalt as like, an independent artist and someone who advocates for the indie music community. And I'm always skeptical of anything the majors are doing. I have appreciated seeing what Kobalt has done and built over the last 25 years, and has really, positioned itself as a real advocacy company for the independent community, and has changed the model and has forced innovation and forced evolution in the industry, and really given a lot of the power and control back to the artists, back to the songwriters, and forced the majors to come along. Because as these powerful players jump on over to Kobalt, like your Max Martin, like your Dr. the ones that are making a lot of money, the majors realized, okay, shit, we can't keep taking advantage of our songwriters, or at least we can't keep doing business the way we've always done it, because they're all going to leave us for another company that gives them more control, more power, all the ownership, and keeps having to prove themselves every year. Whereas, like, historically the majors were just like, well, we own you now, so good luck. And if you want to audit us, good luck. So I've always appreciated that. But my one gripe about Kobalt is it was selective, it was exclusive. That most indie songwriters could not get access to Kobalt, could not get signed to Kobalt. It was like, because as a big player, it was like, all right, you're just for the superstars. You're just for the big songwriters out there. And it's like, well, what are the indie songwriters supposed to, like, what are the smaller indies that are not your Max Martins or Phoebe Bridgers supposed to do? We might, not be making millions on our publishing a year, but maybe we're making thousands, and I'd still love to find a way to get that money. And it has been this like case of just really like swimming through the weeds and trying to figure out, I got to register with this company or this company, and they only collect from the US and not international. So then I got to go register over here. And it's like, I have made my life and business understanding this stuff and trying to help others educate themselves about it. But even for me, it's like shit changes so frequently and there's so many organizations. It's so confusing. So where do we go from here? Which brings
Right.
us to cosign,
Yeah.
which I'm
Well, and the
interested to hear
problem
about.
is real because
Yeah.
no creative person could do the comprehensive job of registering their songs ever around the world.
Right.
It would become your full-time job. You would
Yeah.
spend thousands of dollars on account setup fees for collection societies in foreign countries, right? Like it's not a realistic proposition. I think you framed why we at Kobalt built Cosign in I think a really effective way, which is that Kobalt, we built our business off of building the best platform possible to unlock money from the global publishing system and pay them to some of the top songwriters in the world. And, what we realized over time is that there is a truly growing middle class of songwriters.
Yeah.
And like today, like literally 2025, the ability as a songwriter, maybe you're also an artist, but as an artist or a songwriter, someone who writes their songs, to really grow your audience and build it in an independent way is just greater than it's ever been before, and it's growing exponentially. And we can actually see this in data. Spotify puts out a great end-of-year report called Loud and Clear, and what I looked at, the 2024 Loud and Clear report, and it showed people making $10,000 or more per year on Spotify has grown 200% since 2017. It's now almost 100,000 people, and that's just artists. That doesn't even count producers and songwriters. So it's never been more accessible to build your audience. And I think the problem is that people are still locked out of the publishing system.
Yep.
You can get to the point where you might have $5, $10, $15, $50,000 a year in publishing income, but because it's such a complex landscape, it's so fragmented, it's so complicated, there aren't a lot of great options, people just don't collect that money or they undercollect it. And that, I think, is the context for why we at Kobalt realized, okay, we built this incredible platform, but we're underutilizing it, or we're not expanding it to a space where it really needs it. And that was the birth of Cosign. And I guess I should say what Cosign is. What Cosign is it's taking Kobalt's publishing administrative platform and service, and it's making it as streamlined and flexible as possible, so that emerging artists and producers and songwriters who have publishing rights can, in a really simple way, tap into global registrations, global collections, global transparency from Kobalt, powered by literally Kobalt's admin team and Kobalt's tech, but in a format that is highly, highly flexible. We can get into what that means, but essentially what it means is that you can tap in, you can get your money, and if you want to leave or you want to evolve your publishing setup, you can do that at any time. And that, for us, was the missing link of the need in the industry to really open the doors a little bit more to Kobalt's technology, to Kobalt's service, to let people just collect their publishing money.
And how does it work specifically? Like, break it down. Like, what is your? I'm assuming the business model is you work on commission. You're gonna, similar to Kobalt, you don't own. Obviously, it's admin. So is it a set commission rate for the songwriters or sign up fee? There's what are the services that you provide? Give me those breakdowns.
So what it is comprehensive global publishing admin across every territory, every type of publishing right type. So that's mechanicals and performance, every platform. And it is.
Do you do sync?
And so the way we're doing sync is it's a non-exclusive license because we want to be super flexible, which means that if you're a songwriter on Cosign and you want to do your own sync and you don't want to cut in the Kobalt sync team, that's fine. If the Kobalt sync team is able to secure something, then we'll take the 20%. And when you talk about how does Cosign make money, it's a flat 20% admin rate 20%. Across every territory. It's not doubled for performance. Often in a traditional publishing deal, you'll double the performance rate for reasons we can go down. But it's a single flat worldwide fee with a rolling quarterly term. So you log into Cosign. Rolling quarterly term.
Oh, wow. Because previously you were talking about 3 to 5 year terms, and that's just the Kobalt side. But for Cosign, it's so after a quarter or whatever, if I get a pub deal, I can be like, thank you so much for your work. I'm going to go with this hands-on publishing.
We built it that way by design because we know that a big part of the Cosign market are people who are growing their audience really quickly or know that they have something significant they want to collect on the publishing side, but they might be interested in a traditional deal down the road. And there are certain cases where that could work for someone. And what we're trying to do is not tie your hands behind your back and say you're locked into something, but basically say, look, you have money to collect. If you don't register those songs and collect that money, it doesn't stay in the system forever. We can talk about the black box and what that is, but essentially, if you don't claim your publishing royalties actively, between 18 and 24 months, it's different in different collection societies, but like at a certain point, that money could be just paid out to the major rights holders and you're just going to lose your shot, right? So what we want to do with KOSIGN is say, look, this is an accessible format to send your songs to one company, have them register them everywhere, and just give you your money in the most transparent way possible without locking you down to be there long term.
That's great. And I do want to talk about the black box because that is something all the time that, I chat with songwriters about, and they might have had a great sync, on a TV show or a commercial, something like that, and they had forgotten to register it, with anyone, not a publisher, not even their PRO. And it aired and they're, maybe got their upfront payment. And then someone tells them you should have gotten some back end royalties. They're like, what? What are you talking about? That was 2 years ago.
Right.
And then they go to, BMI or ASCAP or whatever. And they're like, oh, sorry, we don't have that anymore. So talk to me about how that works. When you say that the money isn't theirs anymore, or it gets distributed to the majors, that doesn't explain how that works. That doesn't make much sense, I don't think, when it's just if there's money that was earned for your song, your copyright, and there's publishing money earned, shouldn't that get to you whether you register that day or a month later or years later?
So the way it works is different based on what the collection society is, or sometimes the streaming platform. So it's a very, very fragmented space. There's not one size fits all approach. But the basic idea of it is that these organizations, these collection societies, these streaming platforms don't want to be holding on to money forever, right? If no one ever claims it, they want to get rid of it because they have to pay it to some rights holder, and they don't want to hold on to someone's money that wasn't claimed for 100 years, right?
Right, sure.
So as part of their agreements with the major rights holders, the major labels and publishers, they basically say after a certain amount of time, and what that amount of time is really varies based on where you are and what the source is, but at a certain amount of time, we are going to pay this to y'all. And you guys have to figure out what to do with it because we don't want it to be our responsibility anymore. And that, I think, for most independent songwriters is really problematic because, most of the major companies, what they don't do is spend a whole lot of time going down the food chain to figure out what little guy they should pay the black box to. Some of them just eat it themselves. Some of them pay it to their biggest clients. That all depends on the policy of the major, right? But that's why my message to independent songwriters is this. The way to avoid your money getting trapped in the black box is to just register your songs and make sure that you're collecting them.
Yeah.
And then the follow-up to that is the best way to do that is to have a publishing administrator who is a single organization, a single person you can give your songs to make sure that they're just registered everywhere, that you're not missing a territory, that you're not missing a right type, that you're not missing a certain streaming platform. You're just collecting everything as soon as you can.
So, that makes a lot of sense. And that was one of my biggest gripes with the MLC when they formed, which is the Mechanical Rights Organization in the U.S., the only one that collects mechanical royalties for U.S. streams. When that was formed, it was baked into the law that they would have to hold on to the money for 3 years. And if no one claimed the money that they're holding on to for 3 years, they would disperse it based on market share. And which, of course, the three major publishing companies have the biggest market share. And so they're going to get all of that money that indie songwriters didn't know to claim. And I understand in some, they don't want to hold on for 100 years, but I don't know, maybe it could have been 10 or something, whatever.
I mean, it's so true. And look, if you're an indie musician, if you're an indie songwriter, if it goes into the black box, you are not going to get that money. Because that's where you're competing with the majors, at the major rights holders and the biggest clients of those major rights holders. The way to avoid that from happening is by making sure that when your songs come out, you know what the splits are, and you're sending them to a publishing administrator. That could be KOSIGN. We think we're the best option in the space. It could be a different publishing administrator. But if you're not collecting that money immediately, don't have your backup plan B. I'll get it from the black box. If you're an indie, that's not going to happen.
So there are some super savvy songwriters out there who are all right, KOSIGN takes 20%. Why not just register with ASCAP? That's my performing rights organization. Why not just go to register at the MLC? Because any songwriter, any self-administered songwriter can do that. Can go register with the MLC. And they're like, ASCAP has reciprocal agreements with every performing rights organization in the world for the most part. So ASCAP should have my performance royalties. MLC is collecting all my mechanicals in the States. Sure, they might not collect the international mechanicals, but like that, maybe I look at my streams like that's so negligible. The amount that KOSIGN is going to be keeping in 20%, I'm not going to make that back in terms of my international mechanicals. So aren't I collecting the vast majority of my publishing royalties if I just register with a PRO, if I'm in the States, like let's say it's ASCAP or BMI or whatever, and the MLC, like, isn't that enough? Like, why not just do that? Why work with KOSIGN or another admin publisher?
Sure. I'll say two parts, two answers to that.
Yeah.
First is that increasingly consumption, streaming is just more and more global for more and more artists. So when you talk about your international mechanicals picture, not collecting that could be foregoing like 30 or 40% of your money. And it depends on what your streaming profile is, but that is significant and can't be swept under the rug. And like, Ari, like if I show up to my job at Kobalt every day, like I wouldn't go to my boss and say like, I just want to be paid 70% of my paycheck this week. It's like, it's like I wouldn't do that. I want to be paid 100%. And unless you are registering on the mechanical side in 100% of territories, you're not going to be paid 100%. So I would say number one is, I'd question that assumption maybe that the person's making.
Okay.
Let's put that aside. The second is, why not just register at ASCAP and BMI and rely on the reciprocal arrangements, the reciprocal side deals they have with the other PROs to collect the money?
Right.
I'd say a couple things. One is that I'm going to get a little nerdy, but I know your audience can take it. People want answers,
We're
right?
Smart.
Okay, you guys are smart. So first off, the territorial coverage on those reciprocal arrangements might not be complete, right? Which is to say that in some cases, the PROs might not have a direct reciprocal arrangement with every society. They might have chains of arrangements where there is a daisy chain of societies that are pulling royalties from one to the other, and each of them are taking their cut, right? So that could amplify the number of third-party middlemen that are all taking a cut, and it could also slow down the time it takes to collect the money, and it can also increase the likelihood that someone makes a mistake, right? Because the data is only as good as the society data and the data that they're sharing with each other. And without pointing figures at any society, and the societies are extremely important, like some societies don't have the greatest reputation for like the most sophisticated data and transparency, right? And what often that means is that you could look at a PRO statement and see a line that says international and not get a whole lot of granularity into where that's coming from, how many intermediary third parties were taking a cut along the way, and whether or not you are even covering the whole globe. So what I would say there is that it's imperfect because you might not be covering everything, and there might be a lot of third parties taking a cut, and they might be making mistakes. And let's contrast that now with an admin like KOSIGN, right? How do we collect our money really from across the world? Well, we do a few things. We're registering directly with every society. We're not relying on the societies to pay each other and create daisy chains. We're just saying, pay us directly, right? And we're cutting out that time and that administrative work, and we can control the data. We can control what we're sending them and what we're getting back. And that's why if you were to go to like the KOSIGN client portal and you were going to go to my earnings, you can see line by line from every single society in the world, like your debit card, like I'm a Citibank, right? If I go to my checking account, I can see every single payment that hits my account. It's similar on the KOSIGN portal app. You can just see payments as they come in directly from sources. So there are fewer middlemen, you're getting paid faster, and you're just getting better data. The other thing that we do specifically, which is unique to Kobalt, is that Kobalt owns a PRO called AMRA, which is a digital-only PRO that actually is an international PRO. So in the United States, ASCAP and BMI have a monopoly that the government has given them to be performing rights organizations. That's not the case outside the United States, which means that AMRA is able to actually license directly on the digital side to Spotify, Apple Music, right, to all the streaming platforms around the world, and just enter into licenses directly with them the same way that PROs do. And for KOSIGN and Kobalt, we actually just rely on AMRA to collect streaming royalties outside the US, which means that we can actually just have an end-to-end solution where we don't have to rely on a traditional legacy PRO at all for streaming income. If it's outside the US, we can just do via AMRA, our own PRO, our license directly with Spotify, collect it directly from them, and have it all be in our ecosystem. So
wait a minute. So let me just pause there for a second, just so I understand. So, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, songwriters are only allowed to be with one performing rights organization. Is that correct?
songwriters have a primary affiliation with one performing rights organization.
Right. So I can't be with ASCAP and BMI, or I can't be with ASCAP and SOCAN, or I can't be with ASCAP or BMI and PRS or what, right? It's just
Correct.
You pick one.
But when you sign with a publisher, or when you enter into a publishing admin arrangement, you are relying on that administrator to choose what is the network of collection societies I'm going to register with around the world. Now, in the US, I'm going to register with whatever your home, whether that's ASCAP or BMI, I'm going to do that on your behalf.
Yeah.
But outside the US, we get to choose what path do we want to go through to pay you your money, right?
Now, does that work with international songwriters too? So let's say you have a songwriter from the UK and they're registered with PRS. That's their performing arts organization. How does it work there? Is it you're using PRS locally and then you're still using AMRA internationally, or then you're picking one of ASCAP or BMI in the States, or how does that work?
That's correct. So if you're in the UK, you can still go through AMRA. There are some complications. There's something called beam territories, which are some countries in Central Europe that have slightly different rules. But what I would say, at the risk of getting too granular and in the weeds, is if you're asking, like, why not just go MLC and ASCAP? It's that you can collect more directly and more quickly and more comprehensively by going through a publishing administrator. And by the way, I would say the proof is sort of in the pudding by looking at this. Let's take Max Martin, for example. Or let's not say specifically Max Martin, but let's say Max Martin, Dr. Luke, Phoebe Bridgers, Carol G, like some of our most sort of revered clients on the Kobalt side. Mm-hmm. Not all of them are necessarily relying on an advance from Kobalt. And many of them are primarily relying on Kobalt to, in addition to servicing them on the sync side, like really make sure that they're collecting their money as well as possible. These songwriters aren't going it alone and just registering at ASCAP in the MLC, right? And they are represented by very sophisticated lawyers and business managers who want to maximize the value of those catalogs, right? And or you could say for just a legacy catalog of maybe a band where the members have passed away, but they want to make sure they're collecting their royalties. Generally, the way they do that is by entering into arrangements where they can register them directly with societies via a publishing administrator, rather than hope that one society will just do the best job it can making reciprocal arrangements without as much transparency. So
yeah, that makes sense because, on one hand, I initially was going to push back on like, well, it's hard to compare an indie songwriter to a Max Martin or something like that. It's two completely different worlds. But at the same time, if Max Martin was going to be wanting to make more money because that percentage that Kobalt takes for admin services would actually be a lot more, he would make more money theoretically by doing the registering himself. But I get your point, as in like the daisy chain. I like that idea of all these like various international rights organizations that are taking their commission cut based that they take it down the chain, and you don't want to leave any money on the table. And I totally understand you're acting almost like as an agent where you're going out and hunting down all of these royalties wherever they may exist.
I think it's the speed of payment, and it's also the transparency. Like if you care about transparent reporting, relying on the reciprocal arrangements is not going to deliver that to you. It just isn't, right? And I think, what we've built at Kobalt, like the strength of our business in many ways, comes from being able to build a platform that can collect more directly in more territories and then leverage the data that we're getting to give to songwriters.
So that all makes sense. And I'm curious though, so is KOSIGN open to every songwriter, anyone who wants to sign up, or how does that work?
So KOSIGN is selective. It's, I think, much more open than Kobalt, but there's a reason why it's somewhat selective. So I should say the process is actually simple. You go to KOSIGN website, kosignmusic.com. You can look at videos. You can get lots of educational materials, and you can engage with us and learn what we're about. but you then fill out an application that's pretty simple. It's like 3-4 minutes tops.
Okay.
The reason why we're selective is that comprehensive publishing admin is complicated, and it really requires a lot of resources to do right. And like, what's an example of why that's the case? Well, for example, let's say there is a dispute in a territory where, let's say Germany, GEMA, and you put in a registration and GEMA gets another competing registration that the splits add up differently. And what they're going to do, as you know, is, and this is any society, what they would do, is publishing is an honor system, right? When they're conflicting registrations, the society says, look, I'm actually not going to put my thumb on the scale here. I'm not going to take sides. Y'all have to fight this out and come to an agreement. And I'm actually just going to stop paying royalties on this song, right? Okay, let's say that happens. Well, that's GEMA. That's not us, right? So if we want to help resolve that dispute, we need a global society relations team that has a really strong relationship with GEMA, that can interact with them, that can get on the phone with them, that can say, what's going on? What do you need? What documentation do you need? How can we get that to you so that we can resolve this dispute and get the money flowing again? And that's just one example of where publishing admin is different, perhaps, than distribution, right? Over time, distribution has gotten less complex as aggregation has sort of increased around certain streaming platforms, but publishing has gotten more complex. And, you need someone who's not only entering into licenses. We have a whole team at Kobalt who's round the clock, 365 days a year, re-upping our direct digital licenses with the most important platforms. That's not just Spotify and Apple Music. That could be Peloton, right? That could be Smule. Like, there's a whole landscape, right? So we have to enter into great licenses.
Yeah.
We have to resolve disputes, and it takes a lot of time and resource.
So what is the threshold for somebody? Because it's obviously not at the level of what Kobalt is. What are we talking? If just like materially, someone listening can understand, is like, would I get accepted via the application? What are you looking for specifically from songwriters?
I think for us, you don't need to make $100,000 a year. I think for us, it makes sense to engage when songwriters are, getting to the point where they're making maybe $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a year. At that point, that can justify the amount of resource that we are putting forward. And some people say, like, well, why not just charge us? That's not our model. Like, our model isn't to charge people to get in the door. Our model is to apply a really, really high level of resource to make sure people are collecting their money as efficiently as possible. And, there are open platforms out there. Like, I'm not going to name names, but there are open platforms out there for publishing admin. And I think making that really accessible is important. I think the problem is if you have a few 100,000 songwriters on a platform, and maybe many of them aren't earning very much, it can just weaken the level of service on that platform. Again, it's not in any way a judgment. What I would say is that this is where publishing is different, and what we want to do.
It is. I'll pass judgment. I won't let you. You don't need to do that. I have experienced that firsthand, and I interface with so many artists and songwriters, and you're right about that. Where there are some admin publishers out there that were open to all and accepted all, and I appreciated that from them because it gave a service to those songwriters. But I do get that, because if they're only really making a few dollars a year, it doesn't make sense to engage this company that has this full powerhouse infrastructure with all of that work that it would be to run admin publishing services, because like you said, to clear the issues and to register there properly. And so the support does lack, because, the people, which I have seen and experienced, is like those that might not be making that much money, they take up a lot of the customer support requests. And I've heard that firsthand from some of these other admin publishing companies. And it's like, to their credit, to these songwriters' credit, it's like they want to make sure everything's buttoned up. Something didn't get registered properly. It is well within the right. They should make sure that it registered properly. They should get, all that. But then it's a losing business model for the admin publishing companies. That now they're spending all their time on these songwriters that aren't really making much money. And so the commission that they're taking, it's not going to pay for those services. And I completely get that.
I think what we're trying to do is also acknowledge that this middle class is growing. So it's not that KOSIGN is locking the door at all. We're trying to open the door as wide as we can. Yeah. And we think it's going to be a bigger and bigger segment of people that we're servicing. And we just understand that there is a growing group of songwriters, some of whom are artists, some of whom are producers, some of them are pure songwriters who want that high caliber global admin. They want that high caliber transparency where they can go into a portal and get incredibly granular amounts of detail. And they want real admin service, but they also want flexibility. And I think that's the key with KOSIGN is like when we crafted our publishing agreements, they're almost like T&Cs on the platform. Like our literal goal was to make them as flexible as possible. Like if we can make them more flexible in a way that makes sense, we'll actually just do that, right? Because we want to just build a tool that's like, I almost think of it as like KOSIGN is like a really powerful car, and the car is powered by Kobalt. Like we built an incredible engine, an incredible dashboard, and it can go really fast and really far. And what KOSIGN is basically just saying to the emerging independent community, here is the key to the car. You drive it as far as you want. You drive it as short as you want. When you're on KOSIGN, like you can deliver us your whole catalog. You could also deliver us just your last EP. You're not going to be in breach. Like it's taking a tool and putting it in the hands of songwriters. And, we want to make that balance between making sure that we are ensuring the highest quality on the platform. And again, that's why there's an application process. But like, here's the good news. We encourage people to hone their crafts. We encourage people to grow their careers. Like it isn't an impossible bar to clear. And if you're really early on and you're making like, $50 a year in your publishing, like you can grow that to the point where you will qualify for KOSIGN. And then at that point, it makes sense to really engage, right?
And for those that, because there are so many artists out there that are also songwriters, but they didn't realize that there was a difference between, artists and they didn't realize that their distributor wasn't collecting all of their publishing money. That they might be making a good amount of money from the distributor, and they're like, oh man, I don't know how much I'm making from publishing a year because I've never made money from publishing because I've never known to register with a publisher or a PRO, or maybe they just registered with a PRO or nothing else or something that's just like super common. It has been my calculation, and correct me if you've seen different things, but it seems like from streaming at least, about 80% of all the money that is earned from streaming goes to the distributor and those labels, the artists, and about 20% goes to publishing, those songwriters. Is that about right?
That's about right. It's something that Kobalt's trying to change, and the publishing community in general is trying to change. A lot of that goes down to very old copyright law and the CRB. We feel...
Copyright Royalty Board.
The Copyright Royalty Board, correct. I'm proud to be part of Kobalt where we're lobbying for higher payments for songwriters, but that's true. But remember, that 20% is still of a very, very growing pie, and more of that pie is going to this middle class. And I think that's the context for KOSIGN, which is to say, look, there hasn't been a great option that's super flexible for people who value their independence, they value their control. They're maybe in a transitional moment in their career where they might, in a year or 2 years' time, tap into a more traditional deal. They might decide to stay independent forever. And like, if you're in that boat and you've got $5,000 a year, or $10,000 a year in publishing income, that's really meaningful income. Like, I think that sometimes we forget and we almost write off the idea of like, oh, artists are broke, songwriters are broke. To be an artist means you're going to be broke. And like, that literally bothers me because like today, that's becoming less and less true than ever. More people can grow their audiences today than ever before. More songwriters can achieve an amount of streaming that could actually sustain them than ever before. And I think the problem is that they're locked out of the system and they don't have education necessarily because it's so complicated. It's been set up for them to fail. And there isn't a clear solution to just unlock that money really, really quickly. And that, for me, is like the context of why I feel KOSIGN isn't, on one level, it's an admin tool. It's a tool for people to get paid and get their money, and that's all great. But that's where it can impact culture because, there are people on KOSIGN who have, pieces of really, really big charting songs, right? Or there are people on KOSIGN who maybe don't even have a top charting song, but they just are 100% songwriter themselves. They're an artist, and they've built a following of 100,000 or 200,000 monthly listeners.
Right.
That is the type of money, if you're properly collecting it and publishing, that could be the difference between working 5 jobs and then trying to fit music in and quitting those jobs and actually doing music full time, right?
Yep.
And that will change culture. Like if you can get, I said that stat from Spotify that in 2017, I think there was like like 10,000 people making 10,000 a year or more. And now there's 100,000 people. And if in 5 years' time, that's 300,000 people, like if you can unlock those earnings for those 300,000 people and they're making music full time, like that will change the culture. That will mean better music. That will mean more committed artists who are developing themselves more, who are taking more time to hone their craft. So it's sort of cheesy, but I think we take it really seriously because it's a problem that's not just about like, oh, how do I collect my royalties? It's about how do I sustain myself as a musician, right?
Super important, Jacob. That was
that's
no, that was.
I'll get off the soapbox, but
no, that was great. I was like, man, that was a great summation. It was a great way to wrap it up. Fully aligned. So, I guess the thing to do if someone is interested in KOSIGN, they can go to the website KOSIGN. What's the website again? KOSIGN.
It's KOSIGNmusic.com. KOSIGN, by the way, is spelled with a K, like Kobalt. So it's KOSIGN. Sort of a little bit of a plan words. But yeah, it's KOSIGNmusic.com. And I think the high level picture here is that they can apply. They can obviously stay in touch even if you don't get in the first time. Keep growing your audience. If you apply again, we love to see it. The goal is to demystify publishing, to make it really, really simple and really, really direct for artists and producers and songwriters so that they can really just get paid the money that is owed to them without having to sacrifice like the quality of the system that's doing it. Because it really is. Like it's the same admin system that Max Martin relies on, just made more democratized for people.
So, well, Jacob, this has been super informative. I know that people are much smarter, even though they were smart when they came in. They're even smarter now walking out, and they have a much stronger handle on publishing and how all of this works and how to collect their money. I have one final question that I ask everyone who comes on the show, and that is, what does it mean to you to make it in the new music business?
It's a great question. I would say there's two answers that are both the same thing, which is that you need to fully have ownership over yourself, right? I think on the business side, that means like the way people financially really will make it in the new music business is by owning their rights. I firmly believe that. Some people might make a decision otherwise, but I think in the long run, the way people really make money in music is by owning their rights. And I think on the artist side, owning yourself means being authentically yourself and owning that authenticity and that relationship with your fans. I think that the more you are, it doesn't mean don't sign to a manager, or don't sign to a label, or don't sign to an agent. But at the end of the day, you need to be taking ownership over what you represent and the work that you make. And I think the most successful artists and songwriters today all have that in common, which is that they have a high level of ownership over what they're putting out in the world, and they're not relying on others to mediate that for them.
Jacob Paul, that was great. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it, Ari.
Today's episode was edited by Ari Davids with music by Grassroots District and produced by all the great people at Ari's Take.